In the stillness of the Colombian jungle at night, silence was suddenly torn apart. The roar of engines echoed through the valley as beams of light from fighter jets swept across the sky and massive steel machines moved through the darkness. There was no warning, no signal, only the sudden arrival of a military force heading toward an unknown target. Ahead of them stood a fortress long believed to be impenetrable, guarded by heavy weapons and reinforced bunkers. Behind them was the unshakable resolve to complete their mission in absolute secrecy. This was not a drill. It was the opening moment of an operation that could shift the balance of an entire region. Why did the US military choose to strike a location so heavily fortified? What secrets were hidden behind those concrete walls? And could this surprise assault truly shatter a criminal empire worth billions of dollars? Join Military Power to uncover the story. Don't forget to subscribe to Military Power and explore with us the weapons, strategies, and political choices driving this new war against the world's most dangerous drug cartels. At 4 a.m., the skies over Serranía de la Macarena in Colombia thundered with the sound of U.S. helicopters. Operation Task Force Aurora had begun. It was one of the largest American-led raids against a transnational criminal network in decades. The mission targeted Finca La Sombra, a jungle fortress controlled by the cartel leader known as El Sombra. This base stretched across 14 acres of dense forest, fortified with 12 watchtowers, concrete bunkers, and armored vehicles. Inside, hundreds of captives were locked in underground cells, victims of one of the largest human trafficking operations in South America. Months of intelligence work led to that moment. Navy officer Mark Harris had infiltrated El Sombra's network under a false identity, gathering proof of corruption and slave trade routes that stretched from Colombia to Mexico. His intelligence triggered the operation, coordinated between U.S. Southern Command and Colombia's Special Forces. Within minutes, heavy gunfire erupted as helicopters hovered above and drones mapped enemy movements in real time. The goal was not only to dismantle a criminal empire, but to send a message. The United States was still capable of striking with precision and moral purpose when it chose to act. Yet Aurora wasn't just a battlefield success. It was a reflection of something deeper. In the eyes of military analysts, this rare, decisive strike symbolized what American deterrence used to represent: speed, unity, and resolve. But such operations have become increasingly rare. Over the past years, Washington's foreign posture has turned cautious, fragmented by internal politics and weak leadership. Analysts now argue that deterrence begins not on the battlefield, but in the Oval Office. When the White House hesitates, instability fills the void. Criminal syndicates, militias, and even rival states interpret hesitation as weakness. The result is a world that tests America's limits, from cartel strongholds in Latin America to proxy wars in the Middle East. The success of Task Force Aurora stands in stark contrast to this pattern, showing what can be achieved when America leads with clarity and strength. According to the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, human trafficking and cross-border crime in Latin America rose by 37% between early 2024 and mid-2025. Experts attribute this rise partly to the decline in coordinated U.S. enforcement operations. Even Colombian security officials admit that cartel factions have grown bolder, exploiting Washington's inconsistent engagement. This growing instability demonstrates that deterrence isn't maintained by words or diplomacy alone. It depends on credible action. The raid on Finca La Sombra proved that the United States still holds unmatched tactical superiority. But it also revealed a painful truth. The world is paying the price for America's political indecision. If leadership continues to waver, operations like Aurora will remain isolated victories instead of a lasting strategy. What happens next will determine whether this was a turning point or just a reminder of what U.S. power once meant. What the troops found inside those concrete bunkers would expose something far darker than anyone expected. When the first U.S. breaching unit stormed Finca La Sombra, what they found inside defied imagination. The underground complex wasn't just a base, it was a human trafficking factory. Over 623 hostages were kept in concrete bunkers, bound, numbered, and cataloged for sale. Each prisoner carried a plastic tag on their wrist, color-coded by age, gender, and market value. The women and children were prepared for export, while men were either beaten or forced into El Sombra's private militia. Ledgers later recovered from the site showed that this operation alone was worth more than $420 million. Proving that the cartel wasn't just a criminal network, it was an industrial system of exploitation. Every hallway in that fortress told a story of cruelty. Surveillance footage showed guards casually walking past cages as if they were livestock pens. Some captives had been underground for months without sunlight. The soldiers who entered those cells described a silence so deep it was almost unbearable, until the first hostage whispered, "Are you really Americans?" It was a moment that turned the mission from tactical success into a moral awakening. The rescue was a race against time. The hostages were scattered across separate sections, each sealed by reinforced steel doors and guarded by armed men who were ready to detonate charges if the U.S. forces advanced too quickly. Using drones and thermal scanners, U.S. Special Forces mapped the entire structure in real time. The plan required surgical precision, strike too soon, and lives would be lost, move too slow, and the cartel would retaliate. Teams breached simultaneously from 3 entry points. Navy SEALs led the assault through the West Wing, while Colombian commandos stormed from the south. Inside, flashbangs lit the darkness as soldiers shouted orders in Spanish and English. "We're here to take you home!" one officer yelled as he cut through hand restraints. Despite heavy gunfire, no hostages were killed, a near impossible feat given the scale of the battle. For every door the SEALs blasted open, another life was pulled out of captivity. Behind the success of Task Force Aurora lay months of coordination that bridged agencies and borders. The operation united U.S. Navy SEALs, DEA tactical advisors, CIA analysts, and Colombian special units under a single command center. Intelligence was shared instantly, logistics streamlined, and every movement calculated to prevent friendly fire. This model of cooperation hasn't been seen since major counterterrorism missions of the 2010s. Pentagon officials later admitted that Aurora reminded Washington of what decisive, unified leadership could achieve. For years, inconsistent strategies and political hesitation had crippled America's deterrence capability. Cartels, militias, and even foreign adversaries had learned to exploit that weakness. But Aurora broke the pattern. It showed that when America acts with conviction, it can still change the course of an entire region. One Colombian officer called it the day the jungle learned to fear the stars and stripes again. Despite the mission's success, analysts warned that such victories are becoming exceptions, not the norm. The weakness, they argue, starts not in the field, but in the White House. Political paralysis and shifting priorities have eroded America's deterrent power. According to the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, cross-border trafficking in Latin America has increased by over 30% since 2024, coinciding with fewer US-led enforcement missions. Cartel factions interpret this restraint as permission, filling the void left by indecision in Washington. The images from Finca La Sombra, rows of captives, piles of ledgers, and freed survivors clutching American flags, should serve as a warning. Deterrence is not sustained by words. It depends on consistent action. The world has grown less afraid of America, not because it is weaker, but because it hesitates. If that continues, operations like Aurora will stand as fading reminders of what leadership once meant. For the 623 freed souls, the rescue meant life. For the world, it's a message. Without strength, guided by purpose, cruelty always returns. To pull off this daring rescue, the U.S. assembled one of the largest joint task forces ever deployed in the region. At exactly 4 a.m., silence over the Colombian jungle shattered. Operation Task Force Aurora had begun. The U.S. deployed 405 elite operators from the Navy SEALs, Green Berets, and Delta Force, each trained for hostage rescue under extreme conditions. They were divided into 9 strike teams, each assigned to breach a specific sector of Finca La Sombra, the cartel's heavily fortified base. The goal was simple yet brutal: destroy defenses, neutralize guards, and rescue hundreds of hostages in less than 30 minutes. Every soldier wore a live-linked headset, feeding real-time intelligence from a command center thousands of miles away. At the front, 5 M1A2 Abrams tanks, weighing 68 tons each, roared through the jungle. Armed with 120mm cannons, they tore down the main gates and silenced the cartel's gun emplacements, creating a corridor for the infantry. Behind them, armored vehicles carried breaching tools and medics ready for rapid evacuation. The precision and speed of the attack reflected months of planning and the unwavering belief that American power must act when others hesitate. Above the battlefield, the night sky erupted with controlled fury. An AC-130J Ghost Rider circled overhead, firing its 105mm howitzer and 30mm autocannon at guard towers and armored trucks. 2 FA-18E Super Hornets screamed across the clouds, releasing guided bombs that obliterated bunkers and fuel depots. Overhead, MQ-9 Reaper drones hovered silently, streaming high-definition video to command centers in Florida and Bogota, giving commanders eyes everywhere. The operation ran like clockwork. At 4 a.m., Reaper drones destroyed the cartel's communications hub. At 4:10, Abrams tanks breached the northern perimeter. By 4:15, all 9 teams stormed their assigned entrances simultaneously. Each second was synchronized through encrypted satellite feeds, transforming chaos into choreography, a rare example of U.S. military precision at its peak. Despite intense resistance, coordination held firm. Navy SEALs cleared the West Wing, Green Berets advanced from the east, and Colombian commandos stormed tunnels from the south. The fortress became a web of overlapping operations, each one unfolding in perfect rhythm. Every move, every shot, was tracked and analyzed in real time. This was the essence of multi-domain warfare: air, land, and cyber operations acting as one force. Analysts later called Aurora a 30-minute invasion. It showcased how technology, intelligence, and courage could combine to deliver overwhelming results with minimal casualties. Even under fire, medics treated the wounded and guided terrified hostages toward extraction points. America's military machine, efficient, lethal, and humane, was once again working as one body. Only after new intelligence confirmed the scale of human trafficking did the final order come. Once unleashed, the outcome was decisive. 405 special operators executed flawlessly, 5 Abrams tanks crushed the defenses, and U.S. aircraft dominated the skies without a single loss. The success of Aurora echoed far beyond Colombia. It proved that when America acts with unity and conviction, no fortress can stand. As one SEAL commander said, "We didn't just free hostages, we reminded the world what American leadership still looks like." But as the troops pushed deeper into the fortress, an unexpected counterattack ignited the fiercest battle of the entire war. As Task Force Aurora advanced into the dense Colombian jungle, silence shattered into chaos. Roughly 150 cartel guards loyal to El Sombra launched a fierce counterattack from 12 fortified towers scattered across the compound. The sky flickered with muzzle flashes as Gatling guns, RPGs, and AK-103 rifles erupted simultaneously. In seconds, the jungle turned into a battlefield of smoke and flame. These were not ordinary fighters, they were mercenaries, trained to defend the fortress to the death. Each Gatling gun could unleash nearly 2.1 million rounds per hour, creating walls of fire that shredded trees and tore into steel. The barrage threatened to halt the entire mission, trapping U.S. operators in open terrain. But Abrams' tank crews reacted instantly, firing 120mm shells that reduced the nearest towers to rubble. Green Berets used smoke grenades to mask their advance, while SEALs maneuvered through shallow trenches to flank the gunners. The battlefield pulsed with overlapping explosions, but coordination remained intact. Every team moved with precision, proving once again that even under fire, U.S. discipline and technology could turn chaos into control. When the firefight reached its peak, air support arrived like a hammer from the heavens. An AC-130J Ghost Rider circled above, its massive 105mm howitzer roaring as it obliterated 2 watchtowers in one burst. At the same time, a pair of FA-18E Super Hornets executed pinpoint strikes, dropping guided bombs that vaporized entrenched machine gun nests. Above them, MQ-9 Reaper drones tracked every movement, ensuring no target escaped the assault. The coordination between ground and air units was flawless, an example of multi-domain warfare at its finest. In less than 10 minutes, the cartel's defensive network began to collapse. Tower after tower fell, sending shockwaves of panic through the remaining guards. Several fighters threw down their weapons and ran, only to be captured by advancing U.S. troops. The AC-130J's infrared sensors confirmed no more heavy weapons were active, allowing medics to move forward under relative safety. What started as a desperate ambush had turned into a decisive American counterattack. By dawn, the last shots echoed through the jungle, and the compound lay in ruins. The battle left 47 cartel fighters dead and over 100 captured. On the American side, 6 soldiers were wounded, 3 critically. One Abrams tank had taken a direct RPG hit, bursting into flames, but its crew refused to abandon the fight. The tank rolled forward through the smoke, its cannon blazing, a sight that reignited morale across the battlefield. Soldiers later said that moment summed up the spirit of Task Force Aurora. Never yielding, no matter the odds. When the dust settled, U.S. troops regrouped to assess the devastation. The victory was complete, but the cost was heavy. The jungle floor was littered with debris, smoke, and shattered armor, symbols of a war that should never have been this deadly. Analysts later noted that El Sombra's ability to amass such firepower revealed a larger failure of deterrence. Years of hesitation and political division had allowed criminal empires to arm themselves like private armies. Washington's delay in acting had once again translated into blood on the ground. As the sun rose over Finca La Sombra, the battlefield fell silent. American forces prepared to enter the fortress's central compound, unaware that what they were about to uncover inside would expose the true scale of El Sombra's empire. After silencing the enemy guns, U.S. forces stormed the heart of the fortress and uncovered the treasure of evil hidden within. When U.S. forces finally secured Finca La Sombra, they expected resistance, not riches. But behind reinforced steel doors, Task Force Aurora uncovered something far greater than a fortress, a treasure built on crime. Beneath layers of concrete lay a vault holding nearly $1.5 billion in illegal assets, a discovery that stunned even veteran intelligence officers. What they found transformed a rescue mission into one of the largest anti-trafficking operations in U.S. history. Inside the first chamber, soldiers unearthed $312 million in cash, packed in burlap sacks marked with foreign currencies. Next to it stood 1,500 gold bars, each stamped with international mint seals, evidence that El Sombra's network reached far beyond Latin America. Along the walls were stacked crates of 2.7 tons of precursor chemicals, used to produce synthetic narcotics for export to the US and Europe. The scale of the operation revealed that this was not just a criminal syndicate. It was a multinational enterprise hiding in the shadows. The deeper the troops went, the clearer the picture became. In a secure underground room, special forces discovered 400 encrypted hard drives, 27 satellite phones, and stacks of ledgers documenting every transaction. It wasn't just drugs or gold, it was data. Each hard drive contained records of clients, money transfers, and coded communications spanning several continents. Intelligence teams quickly realized they were looking at the blueprint of a global shadow economy. Further analysis revealed links to at least 118 offshore bank accounts in the Cayman Islands, Luxembourg, and Singapore, holding more than $860 million. The files outlined a financial network that mirrored the operations of a government: secret budgets, coded payments, and foreign contractors providing advanced encryption. Finca La Sombra wasn't just a stronghold, it was a financial headquarters, a place where power and money merged in the dark. These discoveries exposed a deeper failure of global deterrence. While Washington argued over political divisions and funding priorities, criminal networks were quietly building their own systems of governance, efficient, digital, and completely invisible. The evidence suggested that El Sombra's empire had evolved faster than the world's ability to track it. For the soldiers on the ground, the discovery redefined their mission. They weren't just dismantling a cartel, they were confronting an underground civilization built on corruption and greed. One SEAL later said, "It didn't feel like we raided a drug base. It felt like we raided a government made of ghosts." The documents pointed to ties with corrupt officials, business magnates, and shell companies across multiple nations. As dawn broke over the compound, U.S. teams secured the vault and transferred evidence to intelligence units for international investigation. What they had uncovered was more than a crime scene. It was a symbol of what happens when deterrence fades and global leadership hesitates. The blurred line between crime and power had become almost indistinguishable. Task Force Aurora had not only saved hostages, it had pulled back the curtain on a system that thrived in the absence of decisive leadership. And at the center of it all, the man known as El Sombra, the Shadow himself, was finally captured. When U.S. forces stormed the final underground bunker beneath Finca La Sombra, they found the man who had eluded international justice for over a decade. Diego El Sombra Morales, the shadowy figure behind one of the world's largest trafficking empires, was captured alive after a precise explosive breach shattered the steel doors of his hidden command center. Inside, Morales sat calmly before a bank of monitors and encrypted laptops, surrounded by armed guards who surrendered without resistance. For years, he had been the untouchable architect of a network worth over $1.5 billion a year, built on human trafficking, narcotics, and political corruption. His capture marked the collapse of a global criminal enterprise that had thrived on America's declining deterrence and the world's complacency. The impact was immediate. Within hours, 47 of Morales' international partners were named in arrest warrants issued through Interpol, including bankers, corporate executives, and corrupt government officials across multiple continents. Intelligence recovered from the hard drives uncovered ties to offshore accounts in at least 7 countries, forcing those governments to confront uncomfortable questions about their complicity. These revelations sent shockwaves through the global financial system, exposing how cartel money had infiltrated legitimate institutions under layers of secrecy and bribery. Morales' downfall was no longer just a law enforcement success. It was a political earthquake that revealed how criminal influence had quietly shaped parts of the global economy. The arrest of El Sombra was more than a tactical victory. It was a strategic warning. It exposed how modern cartels operate less like gangs and more like multinational corporations, complete with lawyers, accountants, and cybersecurity experts. The data from the seized servers showed that Morales had used legitimate trade routes and shell companies to launder billions, manipulating global markets while evading scrutiny. The operation demonstrated that when Washington acts decisively, it can still dismantle criminal empires that operate across borders and political systems. In the days following his capture, global markets tied to cartel money began to tremble. Several banks froze suspicious accounts, while governments previously hesitant to act suddenly pledged new crackdowns on organized crime. Analysts called the raid a turning point not just for Colombia, but for the credibility of U.S. leadership abroad. Yet it also reignited debate inside Washington. Supporters praised Task Force Aurora as proof that America's strength lies in decisive, intelligence-driven operations. Critics warned that years of political division had weakened deterrence, allowing networks like Morales's to grow unchecked in the first place. Still, the message was clear. When America leads with unity and purpose, corruption loses ground. The capture of Diego Morales sent shockwaves through the underworld and a reminder to the world. Hesitation breeds chaos, but decisive action restores balance. But to fully understand what Operation Aurora meant, one must see both sides, the strategic and the human, of this mission's lasting impact. In the end, Task Force Aurora achieved more than a military victory. 623 hostages were freed, many reunited with their families after years of captivity, turning the operation into a moment of hope amid violence. The billion-dollar empire that once seemed untouchable collapsed in a single night, shattering the illusion of cartel invincibility. For Washington, the message was clear and powerful. The United States remains committed to dismantling global networks of trafficking and narcotics, no matter how deeply they are rooted. Yet analysts warn that this is only one battle won. Many underground fortresses still thrive across borders, feeding off political weakness and corruption. The humanitarian impact, however, cannot be overstated. The U.S. didn't just strike with force, it acted with purpose, rescuing lives and reaffirming the nation's enduring values of justice and human rights in a world that too often forgets them. War may reveal the limits of power, but peace reveals the true strength of humanity. Every conflict leaves behind lessons, not only about strategy and weapons, but also about compassion, understanding, and the ability to coexist despite our differences. If this story helped you see more clearly the cost of war and the value of justice, share it so that others can realize one simple truth. Knowledge is the first step toward peace. The more people understand, the less space there is for hatred and ignorance to grow. Subscribe to Military Power to explore more real stories about war, humanity, and the pursuit of peace in our modern world. Because only by understanding the past can we truly protect the future.